Noreen,
Present.
Hamilton,
Present.
Way,
Present.
Randall,
Present.
Fakir,
Here.
and Ali is absent.
Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
I so move.
I second.
Please call the roll.
Noreen,
Yes?
Hamilton,
Yes.
Way,
Yes.
Randall,
Yes.
Fakir,
Yes.
and Ali is absent.
Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meetings?
I so move.
I second.
Please take the roll.
Noreen,
Yes.
Hamilton,
Yes.
Way,
Yes.
Randall,
Yes.
Fakir,
Yes.
and Ali is absent.
Motion carries. We're at the item on the agenda of communications from the public. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on items either on the agenda or not on the agenda?
I do not have anyone on the call at this moment.
In that case, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is a special education financial update from Michael Martucci.
Hello, everyone. Good
Hi,
afternoon.
Michael.
Hi, Michael.
All right. Let me share my screen. Share screen. Oh, that's going to be easy. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Well, thanks so much. My name is Michael Martucci, for those of you on the live stream. I'm the Director of Student Services here at Ingenium Schools. Today, I'm going to update you guys on special education, primarily our special education finances. We're going to answer the question, what's the state of special education at Ingenium Schools? I think the state of special education is strong. The contents of this are going to be some individual financial and program updates for schools, some comparative data from multiple schools across years, and then some recommendations moving forward. Any questions so far? And just as an FYI, I cannot see you guys, so if you need me to stop, just talk. So here is, let's start first with ICMS. So the way this is structured is I go into kind of some details about the program, and then I go into some financial data. I'm sorry, excuse me for 1 second. Sorry, guys. So my headphones aren't working. So for ICMS, we have 45 students with disabilities, which represents 18.21% of our population. This chart shows our eligibilities at ICMS. We're primarily SLD, which is specific learning disability, about 10% autism, 15% OHI, which is other health impairment, and almost 5% ED, which is emotional disturbance. Another couple ways we kind of think about kids at our school would be whether they have what we call high-profile IEPs. Those are students with high needs or services, one-to-one aids, major behavior concerns. They tend to be more costly than other students. And then whether or not they're litigious, meaning students have or parents have retained counsel or threatened to retain counsel.
Michael, on these, where
Sure.
you identify the high-profile IEPs and litigious, is there crossover between those two? I guess you probably
Almost always, yes.
Okay. I'm sure you don't want to say too much because of confidentiality, but
Yeah.
that's okay. Great. Thank you.
Oftentimes, yes, but not always. So, and then this is our, just one more FYI, I'll show you some 1920 data when we get towards the end. It's a little challenging with the COVID, so we kind of got some data from mid-year that'll be more compelling for comparison. So, but this is ICMS's per pupil expense encroachment over the course of the last few years. We had a pretty high spike in 17, 18. We had some non-public school placements here. And then it dropped. And I'll show you 1920 in a little bit. So that is kind of what we're seeing on ICMS. Any questions there or anything you guys would like me to do differently as we move forward with the rest of the schools?
I looked at this presentation earlier and I really appreciate the layout of it. I found it very helpful.
Oh, thank you. I have one more chart actually, Glenn, that you didn't get to see earlier that I think kind of puts it all together too. So, all right. So ICMS, here we have 63 students with disabilities representing 15.2%. Here we have a lot of high profile IEPs, students with high needs and services, one-to-one aids or major behavior concerns. We also have 3 litigious IEPs. So some of the more compelling, I think, eligibility data for ICS would be in this area over here, our ID population. Intellectual disability is about 3 times a school that what is typical for a school like ours, which is something that we're very proud of, but it does create a lot of challenges. All right, and so our expenses, and ICS's expenses have basically been growing year over year when we zoom out even further than just these years, with our per pupil encroachment over 100%.
Michael, with the ICS expenses growing, is that due to the percentage of students with disabilities, students with IEPs, or is that due to the number of higher need, high profile cases?
Can you withhold that question until the last chart that shows comparative data? Would that be okay? I think it'll just answer it for you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. And if not, I'll come back to it and make sure we answered it. Okay, so Barack Obama Charter School, you're going to notice some differences in eligibility when you're in eligibility patterns when comparing our elementary schools. Our percentage of students with intellectual disability is much, much lower, as is our percentage of students with autism. Here we have 7 high-profile IEPs and 2 litigious IEPs, and a lot of these students are actually newer to our school, the high-profile IEPs as well as the litigious students. We've been getting more kind of high-profile IEPs at Barack Obama over the past couple of years. And here's our Barack Obama spending. Our encroachment percentage was very, very low in 16, 17, and we're kind of moving towards more normalized encroachment as we get more high-profile IEPs. And I'll show you the 1920 data again at the end. So for Clarion, Clarion has 24 students with disabilities, 19.83%. You can see both of our middle schools have a higher percentage of students with disabilities. They're around 20%. Here we have 2 high-profile IEPs and 2 litigious IEPs. And it has a similar kind of eligibility pattern to our other middle school as well. It almost is a mirror image. And then Clarion, we only have 1 year of expenditure data here. Our encroachments was about 126%. I believe you typically don't get federal funding in your first year, and that would, I think, close that gap. So all Ingenium, this is end of the year 18-19 per pupil encroachment. Okay, you can see kind of how it compares across our schools here. There were some rather high expenses at Wings. Setting up the program was led to some high expenses there, as well as some litigious IEPs there. Clemente in 18-19, a lot of this encroachment is from a student that we had placed in a non-public school. So this is the chart that I think kind of answers Catherine's question from earlier. So what we did here was, and shout out to Lee for helping me out with this one. What we did here was we took the data of spending at the first interim and came up with per pupil encroachment for that. So that's like January 31st, I believe. The reason why we did this is so we can compare 19-20, 18-19, and 17-18. And actually, because of the COVID changes in spending due to COVID, sort of the 19-20 end of year spending is not really going to be like a reflection of what the program would have looked like if we didn't have COVID, clearly. So this is actually probably the best way to analyze kind of year over year. So you can see the chart of the different level of spending here. It's higher than in the past. Some of the things, I use some data here at the bottom to kind of help show you sort of what some of the thinking is. So, and you can see that our total student population has been declining, but our special ed population has been maintained fairly consistent in that decline. And I actually tracked our students with ID and ED eligibility has been climbing each year, while our general education population has been declining, or now it's stabilized. Any questions on this one? This one's like the mother of all charts. So recommendation is clearly reducing rising per pupil costs at ICS. And another recommendation is increasing enrollment to capacity at all of our schools. When we look at, just as an anecdotal case study here, when we are adding students in the middle of the year, we tend to be adding more students with high needs, especially at ICS, as our school is popular for having a strong inclusive model. So since we kind of are not at enrollment capacity often, it kind of creates space for kids to come in. We saw this year at Clarion. We've had about 4 kids come in with IEPs since we reopened our enrollment window, which is a huge percentage of the students who came in since that window reopened. So I'm thinking that the enrollment can kind of help on the back end to help sort of control these costs, because we will sort of our special education population will be more, what's the right way to say this? Like students will, if we have a lottery for every school, basically, because we're kind of over capacity, we would end up with like probably a more balanced population of students with special needs compared to other schools. I think that makes sense. Do you guys have any questions?
Michael, this is Wallace. I'm just curious, do you have any benchmark data for the encroachment numbers? For other do you have any benchmark data for the encroachment from other charter schools or from even district schools?
Good question. So, I mean, that's kind of a challenge, really. It sort of depends on who you ask. There's not really like a standard. Schools that invest more in special education and have like high performing schools tend to have very high levels of encroachment. Schools that have less focus on that or like don't have an inclusive model tend to have lower numbers. So it's not like an apples to apples comparison. It sort of kind of depends on the types of programs that you're looking at.
Are there any other questions?
And one more comment, Wallace. I would say anecdotally, though, our spending is high. Our spending is high comparatively, but I would also say that we are in the pot of schools that are investing in it and are high performing.
Okay.
So comparing to schools like that would probably be a good kind of benchmark.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the COVID-19 update.
Okay, hello everybody. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna turn it over to Grace to get started, and then I'll wrap up with a couple comments. So go ahead, Grace.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Kim. I'm the Dean of Students at ICS, and I'm also supporting the cabinet with some COVID-related operations and communications. I'll be going over some brief updates from the state and local restrictions that we have and some planning for our next school year. So for state and local restrictions, as y'all know, the Safer at Home order has been extended for the next 3 months, and California is currently averaging about 35,000 daily tests, and it's up 10,000 from 25,000 tests in April. And Governor Newsom has said that the state will need to test between 60 to 80,000 residents per day in order to reopen. And currently in LA County, we've approached the second stage of our 5-stage roadmap to recovery. And the current health officer order replaces the previous health officer order, and it allows for retailers, manufacturers, select recreational facilities, and beaches to reopen, as many of you might have seen in the news and in the community. And our K through 12 schools are in stage 3, but they are telling us that it is a slow approach to stage 3, even though we are currently in stage 2 of our 5-stage roadmap to recovery. This past week, about on Wednesday last week, we got a joint message from the LA County Department of Public Health and LACO saying that culminations and graduations, even in a drive-through method with students and households in separate cars, are prohibited. So right now, our school sites are currently planning virtual culminations. And then to talk about our planning for our next school year, currently we are fine-tuning our end-of-the-year processes, such as culminations, Chromebook drop-offs, report cards, and report cards including all the participation that we'll be tracking. But right now we are up to date, and the CDE, LACO, CCSA, and other health and legal agencies are hosting a lot of webinars on guidances for how we can reopen our schools. And so a lot of our cabinet members and principals are attending those webinars to keep up to date with all the government and health agencies. And we also have some teacher leaders attending some webinars on how we can plan our instructional systems for next school year as well. Right now, we are working on the contingency plans for the next school year this month, and most likely it's 3 different possibilities, and they're very big overarching umbrellas, whether it be the possibility of it being all in person when we reopen, or number 2, continuation of our distance learning, or a blend of both, where it's going to be an in-person and a blend of distance learning when we do reopen for next school year. There is some updates in the news that the CSUs have decided to close their campuses for their fall semester, and that's something that might start a trend for other educational institutions, but that's something to keep in mind. Other than that, those are my brief updates. Any questions or concerns?
Grace, are you guys having all families return the Chromebooks that they borrowed this school year, or are you kind of monitoring who's re-enrolling?
Right now, we're having all families turn them in. That's the plan. And so Box and Clarion are starting first, since they end a week earlier, and then ICS and ICMS will be turning in theirs as well.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions or concerns? All right, thank you. Next should be Katie.
Hey guys, Katie looks a little different today. No worries. So I'm going to give you guys a brief update on special education and mental health, what we have been doing with that. As I mentioned previously, we amended all of our IEPs and sent home prior written notice letters to our families, changing our basically changing the provisions of services to something that fits the distance learning model. Those are all written. We're proud of that. It was a lot of heavy lifting from our case managers, so shout out to them. Our service provision, I can say that it's been increasing. It's been increasing week over week since this started, but we're still having some challenges with our special education services not being not having the same rate as we would, let's say, in our traditional school. year. To some degree, that was to be expected. Additionally, there were some challenges with tracking these services, as none of the traditional systems are really working to track them. So we had to create our own proprietary systems to track for the distance learning. So we're proud of that and hoping to keep building on those service provisions. Will do, Jennifer. Do you guys have any questions related to that? And the same is true for mental health as well as our special education services, all of our services.
I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Katie. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everybody. I hope my mic and video is working okay. If you can't hear me, please interrupt. I'm going to give you a few updates on what's new in terms of our curriculum and instruction, so specifically for our distance learning plan, as well as some statistics and percentages for access and participation for the last 3 weeks. So the first update is that we worked on providing alternatives to the actual online portion of our distance learning plan and have officially ordered workbooks for the families that have not been able to access either iReady or Google Classroom over the past few weeks. And so we've actually upped our one-time access percentage. We originally had about 142 students district-wide, so across all of Ingenium, that had not accessed at some point either of our platforms. So we're talking one-time access. I'll get to participation in a little bit. But this one-time access piece, we had about 90% of students that were accessing. And then with the workbooks, we increased that to about 94%. So an additional 4% of students opted into receiving workbooks, which are being distributed or have already been distributed. And the other two updates are that we are working on end-of-year reporting and what that looks like with distance learning. So we have spreadsheets that are being shared with our teachers tomorrow with how-to videos on how to calculate the percentage of participation following the CDE's Do No Harm piece that came out as one of the recommendations. And you'll get a chance to see that as we go along and actually finish our reporting, but it'll have a place in the student cumulative records as well as a official report being sent to families at the end of the year, either when they come to drop off their Chromebooks or via mail. And then the last update is about our designated ELD. So we actually have been using 2 different programs, Seesaw and ListenWise, and have been making sure that students that have access are getting designated ELD lessons through those platforms. Seesaw is being used for the elementary level and ListenWise for the middle school level. And we're actually going to be reporting on participation of assignments in that content area as well, making sure that we reach our English learners. So I just wanted to give you an update on percentage in terms of participation. So like I said, our access, that one-time access, making sure that students had been able to get into either Google Classroom or iReady had been about 90%. But out of that 90%, participation looks a little different. So the actual participation, which we are counting as completing an assignment for the week, has stayed around 50 to 60% of students. And that have accessed online. And then the other form of participation is in attending huddles or office hours that are live. And that has been about 35 to 40% of students, because attending the live offerings is sometimes more challenging than completing assignments on their own time. That being said, the elementary schools are actually having a higher percentage of participation right now than our middle schools. And we're looking at trends, especially as we think into next year, about how to help and support the grade levels that don't have as high participation. But that's our current update. If anyone has any questions about the percentages or our alternative plans. I spoke really fast, excuse me. Are there any questions? All right, if there are no questions about the distance learning plan and our participation rates right now, I will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Aguda, to Jay, and he can join our board meeting. But if any questions do come up, we can always give you an update. We're working on getting virtual, not virtual, visual representation of our participation data for the next coming weeks.
Hi everyone, it's Jay. So an update on, hey, how are you? An update on what's going on here on the desktop support side. Our desktop support administrators, Chris and James, have been working directly with families via text and cell phone to provide desktop support to them remotely using the remote functionality we have on our Chromebooks, as well as using cell phone and text message to speak directly to our families who are running into issues. Some families have expressed a need for internet access, and so the desktop support team, along with some support staff at schools, have been calling our families to verify their need, to turn them towards the free and reduced available internet access from our vendors and vendors in the community. And then any families who were ineligible for those things were able to use some of the hotspots that we had in stock to and we triage. We don't have a whole lot in stock, but we triage for our neediest families. We've also reached out to the CDE for some support for additional hotspots through the governor's Google partnership. And so we're still waiting pending on that to see if we're receiving any additional hotspots for that. In closing the year, just as Catherine asked, we will be collecting the Chromebooks at the end of the year, along with the student checkout process with the admin as the students come by at the end of the year. We do this because we just want to make sure we take inventory on them, we can clean them out. We can replace any Chromebooks that are broken with new ones, or fix them and repair them, so that if the chances are we are in distance learning when we come back from break, we will have working Chromebooks ready to go again for our students. So shout out to our desktop support team, who's been really on top of all of that and just continuing their quality of service, not just to our staff internally, but to our families as well. On the data side, I've been working with Curriculum and Instruction Katie to develop some temporary trackers to be able to track the distance learning and be able to report them as report cards. So we've built some temporary tools to do that we will have report cards by the end of the year. We've also worked heavily in the KM department on vetting new distance learning apps that are coming, because it's been unprecedented that we've never had this experience before. So a lot of teachers have brought up distance learning apps, but that also brought the risk of issues with student privacy and staff privacy and data. So our staff has been really on top of making sure that the apps that we do allow, that we clearly vet their privacy policy, know where the student information is going, and then have a process for at the end of this, when we return to schools and we have no longer a need for those distance learning apps, we can expunge the data and ask those vendors to remove the data, etc. Also, we have tech gurus. So these are our teachers who are super tech savvy and are taking on this leadership role. And what they do is support our teachers on the ground. Even if there wasn't any COVID, even if we weren't in the COVID, we'd be able to deploy them to support our staff, to train them on learning apps. And so now that we're here with distance learning, they have been instrumental in supporting our teachers and staff on creating videos, using Google Classroom, all of these apps that we've been able to have. They've been holding weekly office hours, etc. And they've been working directly, particularly Christina Miller, who's our lead tech guru, has been working directly with Curriculum and Instruction to develop ways to train our staff and use micro-credentialing to show that they've learned different aspects of distance learning. So it's really cool and really innovative, the things that are happening on that end. Does anybody have any questions? Awesome.
I might have missed it.
Yeah.
Can you give me just sort of on a very summary, high-level basis, what proportion of our students are not online? I think I heard something like 10%.
Yeah, and that's through some anecdotal data from just speaking to teachers on the number of students that have not logged in. I have some data on the students who have been on Google Meets, but that does not comprise their entire online experience. So they may not have got on Google Meet, which is our teleconferencing platform, but they may have joined, let's say, they may have submitted materials through Google Classroom. So it's varied a little bit, but that is probably our best right now metric right now is working with the teachers to find out who hasn't been online, who hasn't had an online presence yet, either through Google Meet or Google Classroom, etc. So 10% is the figure right now that we're working with.
Related question, and Katie might have, I didn't quite understand it the way Katie was presenting it, but there's the question of, first off, do they actually have access to the internet through their Chromebook? And what I'm hearing is that that's probably on the line of 90%. Then the second question is, how intensely are they actually using it? I think what I heard you say is that, if I remember correctly, something like half of them might actually be using iReady and the various apps that are out there to an extent. And then something like 30%, I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, are actually using, are sitting into online classroom sessions that are group sessions, Zoom calls, or like Zoom calls.
Google Meet calls, yeah. Yeah.
So other than that, we don't really have a very good means yet of determining how deep this participation is and how useful it is. We're still trying to get our arms around all of this, and it's very new throughout this whole process.
You hit it right on the head, Glenn. Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on COVID as it's impacted our employees and some of the things that so some of our employees have been personally impacted by the coronavirus when those occasions have occurred, whether it's by suspicion or by positive testing. We have been following the Coronavirus Families First Act and offering support to employees that are impacted. We have processes and protocols in place to address those issues. We also have processes and protocols, as I mentioned last time, to continue to monitor PPEs for those employees that are coming on site. As we near the end of the school year, we've began having proactive meetings with our site leaders and all of the other impacted department heads to make plans to ensure that when we return to campus and as we collect devices at the end of the year, as we distribute materials back to families, that we are doing so in a way that is the safest and the least social possible. And so we've already begun planning and have processes in place to ensure employee safety. And then in the same vein, we're beginning conversations and just beginning some very initial planning steps for what a return to school might look like next year. As a cabinet, we've begun discussing and addressing how we might handle that and are beginning to think of, again, the equipment and materials that we might need, the processes and procedures that we might need that may be different. And so that's where we are at with employees. Does anybody have any questions?
Melody, how has hiring been impacted through COVID?
That's a great question. I would say that not as much. I mean, I think we may see less turnover this year in our own employees leaving for other positions for whatever reason. But in terms of finding new teachers, we've been fairly successful in finding new teachers. And people are still able to get TB tested and to have their DOJs completed, which are kind of the two critical pieces that you would worry might be impacted by the coronavirus, but we've still been able to hire people. So, so far it's been really good, and really the only meaningful impact has been we've been having remote interviews rather than any in-person interviews, but we've been able to handle that really well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Melody. Do we have any other COVID-19 updates? In that case, Irlanda, can you give us the enrollment update?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Can you guys see me? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. We don't see you.
Oh, okay. Great. All right. Well, I sent you guys a document with 3 different scenarios. So your request, Mr. Noreen, I put this document together and I added 3 different screenshots from our ENR pipeline dashboard. I'm not sure if you guys have access to that, so that's why I just screenshot some of those reports and put it in here. On your right side, you will see the RCRV status only, and these are the status that we are more confident they will of students that will come the first day of school. I put details from previous years, and I don't know if you have any questions on that, but I will say I will talk about our current situation with enrollment. Like I said, you will only see the RCRV on your right side of the document, but actually we have 341 students in the pipeline, meaning that they're in some phase of the process of enrollment process, and they're like filling out documents online or just finishing their parent orientation for them to be completely enrolled. And you will see only the, the 125 students in RCRV, but like I said, we have 341. We are monitoring the numbers every day. And according to our consultant, Scala, we are on our way to reach our aim for all schools. Do you guys have any questions? I'm pretty sure you guys have time to read all the scenarios, right?
My main question, I think you just answered, which was, I think you said that Scola is predicting that we're on target to meet our enrollment goal.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Have you done, has the organization done any polling, understanding like if families are going to be returning due to COVID? I guess like anecdotally, I'm hearing parents say, not necessarily Ingenium parents, but parents say, even if schools open up, I may not send my kids back. I'm not comfortable. Have you guys heard anything like that or done any type of polling of our current families?
Yes, with the digital enrollment process now, we have more communications with parents, and what we're doing, actually, admin managers and office specialists, they're helping us on calling the parents and ensure that they are finishing their re-enrollment packet online, and that's how we're monitoring those numbers as well. ENR is focusing on the new parents filling out those documents online, but yes, we have admin managers and office specialists following up with those parents as well. We haven't seen any decline on the number for none of our schools, and we're happy to announce that because last year we have to parents saying in the beginning, yes, we're gonna return, but end up around this time saying, you know what, I'm not coming back. But that number might change in a couple of weeks, just because they're because of the COVID-19, parents are losing their jobs, they're losing their houses, the ability to provide for their families, and they have to move to other cities and even states. But for now, we haven't seen that number. We haven't seen or hear from parents saying that they're moving like in a high number. We haven't heard anything about it yet.
Thank you. If that does change, will you keep the board updated if we see, that those numbers change, or we see more families, coming back and saying we're not returning, or we're not going to bring our kids into school at all, or we're moving? Can you just keep us updated?
Definitely. I will have an update on that if you guys want at the end of June. Is that okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer, can you add that so I can remember? Thank you. Any other questions?
I don't hear any other questions, so let's move to the next item, which is the board meeting schedule. And I'm not sure who is going to discuss that. Will that be Jennifer or Jake? I'm sorry, the TAP annual update. We have the TAP annual update from Melody.
Glenn, Catherine, I wanted to add one thing to the previous agenda item. Is that okay?
Yes.
We're putting together a task force. We will be putting together a task force here in the next couple weeks. There's obviously information is, there's a lot of speculation about what school will look like when we return, but not a lot of solid guidance. Most of the information out there is that a lot of the control is going to be local, but obviously under the guidance of local public health agencies and governance agencies, our authorizers, the state, county. One of the things we will be doing, whether we have parent representation on the task force or whether part of the task force work is to engage with families, is to get an idea of what people are comfortable with in different scenarios. And I anticipate that regardless of what our reopen looks like, there will be options for families who don't feel comfortable. But our aim is to try to create a model that's as safe as possible and aligns with the recommendations from local health agencies. And that I was going to add one other thing, but it slipped my mind. So hope that helps too.
If the other item comes up, you can chime in later. Melody, are you going to tell us about the TAP?
Yes, I had a presentation that I will share with you. And I believe this was sent out to the board previously. So every year we do kind of a final update for our teacher advisory panel. Our teacher advisory panel is essentially a leadership position that requires teachers to actively and systematically seek out the thoughts, feelings, and suggestions of the entire teacher body. This was our purpose for the 2019-20 teacher advisory panel. And essentially, they're acting as a clear line of communication and a liaison between the home office and teachers in order to build trust, to identify issues, to gather feedback, and to create practical and realistic action steps that work towards solutions in really ultimately improving academic and emotional well-being for all students and staff. So this year, our panel met fewer times than last year. That was an adjustment we had made this year. Our panel met 4 times. The panel introduces what we call red button issues. And these are issues, again, that the teacher advisory panel has been sort of summoned as the mouthpiece for the teacher body. And so they bring back these issues we call red button issues. As they bring those back, we place them into categories, whether the issue is backlog, so meaning we don't have the capacity to work on this issue now, whether it's in progress. So we say, okay, this is something we're going to actively seek to remedy. And then also, if they bring the issue to us and we're able to resolve it, we're able to put it in a resolved status. So I wanted to give you guys, rather than just showing you the data from this year, I wanted to give you a comparison between this year and last year. So here you can see at the bottom are the different categories that we've placed the issues that were brought to us in. In blue, you'll see the 2019-20 numbers, and the red is from last year. Last year, we had a total of 56 issues that were brought before the panel. Keep in mind the TAP last year did meet 5 times rather than 4, so there is some variation in the number of meetings. And this year, there were 33 issues that were identified. And you can see last year, the biggest issue that teachers brought forward was teacher support, whereas this year, it was mostly concerns about behavior, followed by technology, whereas last year it was teacher support followed by special education. Any questions about this chart before I move forward? Okay, and so here's just a summary of how we ended the year, where we were in our resolve status. As you can see in the top here, we had more issues. About 40% of our issues were able to be resolved last year, whereas this year we were only able to resolve about 20%. Part of that is likely due to the impact of COVID, and a lot of the work remained in progress because some of the issues sort of were site-based and not necessarily remote-based issues. And so that caused many of our issues to remain in an in-progress status, whereas last year, again, we had twice as many issues that were able to be resolved. These were just some testimonials from our TAP members. A lot of really positive feedback from being on the TAP committee. Mostly just the feeling of being listened to and appreciated and knowing that they had an impact. I will say 2 of the major issues that our TAP advised on and felt the power of their voice was on our technology, some of the technology issues that we brought to them, the questions that we had about some of the technology that we were using, grade booking systems, things like that. And then also they gave us some great feedback on our mission and values. So next year, we plan to continue the TAP. Based on feedback, we might consider meeting slightly more in the first quarter. That's when things are kind of, there's a lot of issues brought to the core, and we want to make sure we're able to help and address those more quickly. They requested a cameo from our superintendent. Jake ran the meetings with me last year, and this year it was just me. So they missed seeing Jake, so maybe we'll add him back in next year. And then this year was the first time that I was involved. I think that we had a special education teacher. So everyone sort of echoed that they really appreciated having a more diverse and well-rounded set of teachers on the advisory panel. Any questions?
No questions. Thank you, Melody.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is discussion of the board meeting schedule. And will Jennifer or Jake be taking the lead on that? Jennifer.
Looks like maybe I am. Well, we had some conversations over the last few months about whether or not it would be beneficial to the board to meet less frequently. And so we spoke with the authorizers and got confirmation that that would be acceptable. So we're just bringing to the board a proposed calendar. If you look on your agenda that was sent out, it has a live link with the calendar on it, and it had X'd out months that we would not have a meeting. So we just wanted to put that out to you guys for comment. And if there was any, if everyone was okay with it, then we would move forward with going back and putting in dates and times and finalizing the calendar in advance of our June meeting.
I'm still a little bit confused. I tried looking at the split year calendar that is in the board package, and that one doesn't have any X's on it.
Okay, well, I don't know.
It does now, Glenn, it does now. It was updated recently. So if you re-click the link now, it shows up.
There must be something wrong with my link. I'm not seeing it.
Let me share it. Let me pull it up and I'll share it.
That would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so in the past, we would not have meetings in July anyway. So that would be considered X'd out as a non-meeting month. Moving forward, we would propose a meeting in August, October, November, January, March, May, and June. It only reduces our meetings by 5. And there is a potential, especially with the pandemic, that we may have to have special meetings. And there's no way to predict that at this point, not knowing what's going to be recommended by the governor or by LAUSD or Compton USD. So if the board wants to move forward with this kind of a calendar and having less frequent meetings, that's something that we absolutely can do. But there is a potential either way for special meetings to continue to happen in light of this kind of extra, I don't even know how to describe it, unknown future that we have in front of us.
Is there any discussion?
I was going to add also, so we don't normally meet in July, nor do we normally meet in December. So really, I think it's 3 fewer than we would normally. And I think that feels really reasonable. My only concern would be that the meetings would become very long. But I feel like we've become very streamlined around reviewing information before the meetings, and the presentations have become very, straightforward. They're really strong. So I think this is great. And I think I also, when we do have a special meeting, I feel like you schedule it well. So I'm really open to fewer regularly scheduled meetings, but being open to knowing that we'll have to have some special ones, especially due to COVID. So I like this plan.
Anybody else?
I agree with Catherine.
I think that, like what you said, Catherine, was a really valid point, and it's really easy to get away from things that work well and kind of fall back into our own routine. So even with tonight, we probably need to do a better job of making sure that, the presentations are not reviewed every slide as much as we just ask, does the board have questions? And that if we have a longer meeting, will really help out. And just knowing that the board has already reviewed the documents and then just asking for feedback or conversation about specific items instead of going through entire presentations.
We're generally meeting on the 3rd Monday at 5 o'clock, correct?
Yes.
And is there any, does anybody have a need to change from that? Any discussion about that as the date that we will have? As a result, my expectation is that the board calendar for next year will look like the calendar that you just presented, but the actual board dates will be 5 o'clock on the 3rd Monday.
Yes.
Any other discussion of this item? I hear no more discussion. Let's move to the next item, which is items scheduled for consent. Is there a motion to approve the items scheduled for consent?
I so move.
A second.
Please take the roll.
Maureen?
Yes.
Hamilton?
Yes.
Way?
Yes.
Randall? Randall? He's muted, Chris.
We didn't hear it.
One more time, Mr. Randall.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Ali is absent.
The next item on the agenda is resolution to notice annual organization meeting.
I didn't vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I said your name, didn't I?
No.
I'm sorry, Miss. I'm sorry, Miss Victor. I got all out of whack.
Yes.
Can you vote yea or nay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item for discussion is the resolution to notice the annual organization meeting. Is there any discussion of this resolution? Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
I so move.
I second.
Please take the roll.
Noreen,
Yes.
Hamilton,
Yes.
Way,
Yes.
Randall,
Yes.
Bakir,
Yes.
and Mr. Ali is not here. I would note that Mr. Randall is up for his board term ends on June 30th. So we will be holding an election regarding his position.
The next item on the agenda is board meeting evaluation and planning for the next meeting. Next meeting, my expectation will be fairly full of, well, the LCAP has been deferred.
Correct.
So there actually might not be that much happening at the next meeting. It is
We'll
the
have
annual
a lot of financial items.
Pardon?
There will be financial items, financials, the
Okay.
budget for the year, things like that.
Okay. Any comments on the annual meeting cycle or on a meeting evaluation for this meeting?
I will just echo that I appreciated having a lot of the materials ahead of time, and I thought that the presentations were really straight to the point. And I think for transparency for our stakeholders, especially because this is all virtual, I appreciated how Melody and Michael went through the presentation, but very quickly, so people could still see the information, and we're very transparent about it. But board members reviewed things ahead of time and were ready with questions to make sure we were still, moving through at an appropriate pace. So I just think that went well.
I agree. And I think that the presentations that were posted for the board were very understandable. You could really go through it quite quickly and really understand it. And so, good job.
I learned something new from almost everyone, things that I didn't really know before, perspectives. A great example of that is a special education presentation that Michael made. So I very much appreciated them. The one thing that's missing, but I know it's the circumstances, I really miss not having an update on the academic progress of our students. But I understand that that's just the situation we're in right now. We're not going to be able to get that. I thought that what we got from Jay, for example, in terms of just a feel for how many students are actually online and learning, that's probably the best we're going to get. And I'm just reflecting and I appreciate all the work everyone is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments?
I'm wondering if it's possible. I find the COVID update really helpful, and I'm sure that each person has kind of their own notes as they present because you guys are giving a lot of info. I process a little bit better being able to see things. Is it possible to get a written summary just like linked? Like it could be a Google Doc. It does not need to be like a fancy presentation that we can have. Like often I like to refer back to presentations or things like that. I would find that helpful. Only if it won't take a lot of time. If it could basically be a copy paste or kind of email in, just so we have a nice summary and we don't have to get everything only verbally.
I did find it a little bit difficult to track all of the COVID-19 presentations because for not having a document like that. Any other comments? In that case, we can move to the next item, which is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
Please take the roll.
Noreen,
Yes.
Hamilton,
Yes.
Way,
Yes.
Randall,
Yes.
Fakir,
Yes.
and Ali is absent.
The meeting is adjourned at 6 o'clock.
Catherine, happy Mommy's Day.
Thank you, everyone.
You know, look at